Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, after 6 years of marriage, Opie discovers his wife is having an affair with his friend's husband. Confronted, she confesses. Heartbroken, he divorces her, gaining custody of their children. His friendship with the betrayed wife ends, leading to another divorce. Despite his pleas, forgiveness seems impossible. The affair ends, and the man moves forward, unable to forgive May's betrayal. Now let's get into the story. My wife and I had been married for 6 years before we went our separate ways. I met May when I was 25 through her best friend, Erica. Erica was a family friend of mine, and we saw each other often. It was even Erica who suggested that I hang out with her one day, the day I met May. So we talked to each other and we got along well. As of then, Erica was already engaged to her boyfriend Mark, and they were already planning to get married. So May and I saw each other often because of the wedding plans we had to make. After Erica's wedding, May and I grew closer, and since we were both single and liked each other, we dated. May worked as a nurse in the State General Hospital while I worked as a mechanic in an automobile shop. The truth remains that I loved May a lot, and after we had dated for a year, I asked her to marry me and she said yes. Before we got married, she moved in with me because I loved having her around and she always wanted to be with me, too. Our families were aware of our relationship, and they knew we meant serious business, so they did not object to us living together after our wedding. We were able to move into a bigger apartment because we wanted to start a family immediately. Luckily, we had a daughter in the 2nd year of our marriage and a son in the 4th year. We were a happy family, and I knew that my greatest wealth was my family. So May and I worked harder to foot the bills and take care of her children. While my job allowed me to come home earlier and spend time with the kids, May did not have enough time, so most times she was to work overtime just to make some more money. Also, as a nurse, she did both morning and night shifts, and she often returned home by 2 a.m. every day. Then she'd leave early in the morning again after dropping the kids at school. Because May returned in the early morning hours, she got used to sleeping in the children's room or on the couch, and she rarely slept in our room. I didn't have a problem with that either. As long as she returned home safely, she could sleep wherever she wanted. Also, May slept in the children's room because she had to wake up early so she could take them to school by 6:30. She also believed it would help her bond more with the kids, since she was rarely available to spend time with them because they were already asleep by the time she got home. One morning, I realized the kids had not come to jump on me like they did every morning. I checked my alarm clock, and it was 7 a.m., and the house was awkwardly quiet. I went to the living room to check if May had slept off, but when she wasn't there, I went straight to the children's room, and they were still deeply asleep. At that point, I became petrified that something had happened to May because it was unlike her to not return home after her night shift. I called her several times, but she did not take my calls, which made me more scared. Without wasting time, I called her mother and told her that May did not come home, and her mother began to call her too, but she still did not respond. Luckily, I had a next-door neighbor I could trust, so I asked the teenage girl to look after my kids. While I drove to May's place of work, I was already halfway to the hospital May worked at when she called me and told me that she had slept off in one of the patients' rooms and she was on her way back. Hearing that calmed me, and I turned back home. Although her excuse did not make any sense to me, she wasn't anybody's personal nurse, so it was weird of her to say that she slept off in a patient's room. She came home that morning and took the kids to school, then left for her morning shift, so we didn't talk about the incident, especially since the kids were around. The following day was a Saturday, so I woke up early and met her cooking breakfast in the kitchen. I brought up the issue of the night she didn't sleep at home, but she became defensive and tried to change topics. I had been with May for years, so I knew when she was trying to hide something. When I saw how she acted, I demanded to go through her phone, but she refused to give it to me. Out of anger, I snatched her phone from her, and I told her I had the right to go through her phone because I was the one who got it for her. Immediately after getting the phone from her, she started crying, and that's when I knew something was wrong. When I went through her phone, I was shocked to see that May was having an affair with Erica's husband Mark, and the night she didn't come home, she spent it with Erica's husband at a hotel. I was really heartbroken and devastated when May saw the look of disappointment on my face. She began to say that Erica's husband led her on, and he said he was not happy with Erica anymore. I could not believe what she was saying. She broke my trust and betrayed her best friend's trust. However, as I went through their texts, I discovered they had been dating for more than a year under our noses, and none of us suspected anything between them. I even found out that Mark would occasionally send her flowers and chocolates while she was at work. When I had seen enough, I took screenshots of her conversation with Erica's husband and sent them to Erica shortly after. Erica called and she was crying and yelling simultaneously. She said so many hurtful words to May, and their friendship ended as fast as I could. I divorced May and got custody of our children. Erica also divorced Mark because she could not take the heartbreak too. I was expecting May and Mark to end up together after we were out of their way, but they didn't. They broke up immediately after. After that, I moved on with my life. And no matter how many times May begs me, I don't think that I'll ever be able to forgive her. Today's second story. In this story, OP met his wife at a hospital and quickly fell in love, eventually getting married. However, after 2 years, his wife became distant due to a supposed mentorship with a manipulative man. It was revealed she was cheating and using his money to support her affair. Confronted with evidence, she begged for forgiveness but was ultimately divorced. He values being single over a toxic relationship. Now let's get into the story. I met my wife a few years ago at a hospital where I went to visit my friend's wife, who just gave birth. Coincidentally, she came in at the same time. But because my friend's wife was asleep, we had to wait in the lobby for about 40 minutes to an hour before she woke up. People who know me well know I am very extroverted, and I talk to strangers a lot. While waiting, I tried making jokes with the nurses at the reception desk, but they weren't having it. So I went back to sit with my wife. I tried my best to keep my mouth shut, but we could tell that the silence was awkward, and the moment I started talking, we both busted into a loud laugh. I didn't know she had been observing me. She knew I would try to talk to her. From there, we talked for almost an hour until a nurse came to tell us my friend's wife was awake, and we both went in to see her and her baby. As much as I would love to mention my wife's name, so the people out there can stay away from her, I'd love to keep this anonymous in case any of our friends stumbles on this story. Before we left the hospital that day, I got my wife's number and we started talking. I also followed her on Facebook and we chatted there all the time. She was gorgeous and I loved almost everything about her. As of the time we met, she was working at a veterinary shop and I worked for a construction company. We used to hang out whenever we were free, since we were both single and slowly grew fond of each other. One of the reasons I loved my wife was that she was always seeking new ways to improve herself. She reads self-help books all the time and listens to all of those personal development podcasts and the rest. Honestly, she also helped me build the habits of reading books and trying to become better, and it made me glad to have a partner who cared about my growth. Fast forward to some months later, we got so close, and we always told each other about what happened during work. Even without meeting my colleagues at work, she knew their names, roles, and everything that happened during work hours applied to me. I knew everyone's name in the vet clinic she worked at, including the names of the animals that came in daily and those that returned. I was sure she was the one for me at that point, and I asked her out. When she said yes, I asked her to move in with me so we could begin to plan our lives and future together, and she did. She moved in with me, and we became a super couple. I loved her so much that I did everything for her. In fact, I didn't let her contribute to paying rent because I felt it was my responsibility. I bought her whatever she wanted, and we went on many fancy dates together. Before I met my wife, I had been in 3 different relationships, but they all cheated on me, and none of my exes cared about me like my wife did. so I believed she was the one for me. In less than 3 months of dating, I met her family, and she met mine too. Our families knew we were dating each other, and we were pretty serious too. So, after 10 months of dating and living with each other, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. Before we got married, we both agreed we would have kids after 3 years of being married, so we could spend time with each other, do the things we loved, and not have to put our lives on hold. Then most importantly, we would have saved enough money to give our children a comfortable life. A year after we got married, nothing changed, and everything was still beautiful and blissful, like when we were still dating. But things began to change between us after we celebrated our 2nd-year anniversary. My wife began to show less interest in the things she used to love, including our 2nd anniversary, which she used to look forward to, and that's when I began to suspect that something was wrong. It all started with her obsession with personal development, and she claimed she found this new mentor online, a man in his late 30s, who she asked to mentor her for a fee, and he agreed. According to my wife, this man was a life coach, and he had mentored many people in the past and helped them build their lives. At first, I didn't have an issue with her having a mentor because I knew she wouldn't back down or change her mind until she got what she wanted, so I allowed her to do her thing. However, a couple of weeks after she started her mentorship classes with him, I noticed they were getting closer and closer, and I kept feeling that something was off between them, but I shook it off. It wasn't enough that I was paying for the mentorship hourly, but she always came up with new excuses for me to pay for things I didn't understand. She met with her mentor almost every week, and even had to cancel most of our lunch dates to be with him. Then, as if that wasn't enough, whenever I came home from work, I'd have to eat my dinner alone, watch television alone and go to bed, because she would talk to him for hours on the phone without spending time with me. I complained about it, but she said I was making a mountain out of a molehill, so I let it slide, expecting that she would change, but it got worse. Once, we were supposed to go to my parents' house for a while, for my dad's 62nd birthday, but she didn't show up and refused to take my calls. That evening, when I returned home, I met her and her mentor having dinner at her home, and I was so mad. When she saw me, she smiled and acted like everything was fine. It even made me madder when I found out she forgot about her Heavyel's birthday, even after I reminded her that morning. The craziest part was that we had not had dinner as a couple for weeks, and she even stopped cooking, but there she was, eating and laughing with her mentor. I got so mad and yelled at her. Then I asked her mentor to leave, but she stood up and started challenging me in front of her mentor. She said he had taught her a lot of things, and he could not leave, so I had to choose between joining them for dinner or doing something else. I was so furious that I left the house and returned to spend the night at my parents' house. That night, I stayed awake close to my phone, hoping she would call and beg me, but she didn't. And that was when I was forced to look up her mentor online. To my greatest surprise, I spent hours digging and could not find anything related to mentorship or personal development about him. When I was frustrated at finding nothing, I hired a private investigator to investigate him. Weeks after digging, the PI I hired discovered he was a convicted felon and a master manipulator with arrest warrants. I could not even believe it. The PI could not find anything related to mentorship with him. And that's when I realized that my wife had been playing me for months. She was getting money from me and giving it to her lover as his payment while I worked my ass up to give her a better life. I collected all the evidence from my PI and paid him off. The next day, I went home early so I could meet my wife at home and show her all of the evidence, but I caught them doing it on my couch and I was enraged. I hid him before I threw the evidence on the table, and my wife did not look surprised. It was an indication that she knew everything about him. She then started begging for forgiveness and asked me not to say anything. I told that my hand contacted the police and she should go ahead and marry her lover and rot in jail for all I care. While I was yelling at them, the police arrived at my house and took him away. Immediately he was taken away. She went on her knees and began to beg me. She said he manipulated her, but since he was out of the picture, we could return to how we were. Hearing that made me madder, so I kicked her out and called her parents to let them know their daughter would be coming home soon and we weren't together anymore. Months later, we divorced and we went our separate ways. Until the last 6 months, She kept calling me with different numbers until I warned her that we could never be together even if it were in her next life. Of course, I miss her, but being single is way better than living with a cheating spouse. Even the last few months of our marriage were hell for me, so I'm glad I made the right decision.